In this video, we're going to take a look at how to prevent the table of the column wasn't found error when you reorder columns, when columns are missing, and when column names change, and how to make these changes dynamic. So let's get started. Here we have the automated age analysis report that we created. You can watch how we did that in this video here, Power Query Age Analysis Report. The link is in the description also. When we hit refresh on our query, we get the error, the column 30 days of the table wasn't found. That's because our source data, which is this debtors data on the left here, doesn't have any invoices that are due in the next 30 days. Let's see how we can prevent this from happening. Double-click on the error here in the Queries and Connections pane, and here in the Power Query Editor, our query displays the error in the yellow pane. Let's click on Go to Error, and Power Query takes us to the reordered column step, as this is where the error occurs. Let's click on the step before when the error occurred, which is the pivoted column step, and our query is still working at this step. If we look at the reordered column step in our formula bar, here is where the 30 days is hard-coded, and as our source data doesn't have any invoices due in 30 days, our query breaks here. This is really easy to prevent. In the formula bar, all we need to do is insert a comma after the curly bracket and start typing missing, and these options are brought up. So we want to use missing field.use null, and our query is fixed. What this does is that it indicates that missing fields should be included as null values. So if we have a column that's no longer in our source data, this function will still show the column but with null values. So our error has disappeared. Let's send this back to Excel, and if we hit refresh, our query doesn't break. Let's remove our invoices that are not yet due to test this out. So that'll be everything in the month of January and February 2022. And hit refresh. And our query doesn't break. And it returns our not due with null values. Next, let's look at how to dynamically add missing columns and prevent our query from breaking. Here in our sales data, we have 5 columns, and here on the right is our report generated from Power Query. If we delete a column from our source data and hit refresh, the query breaks. Here's how we can prevent this from happening. I've added our column names here. Let's send this to Power Query. Let's rename this table to Sales Data Column Names and press Enter. We want to transform this table, so in the Transform tab, click on Transpose, as we want our rows to be in separate columns. Next, click on Use First Row as Headers. Let's change our sales value column to a whole number. Now what we want to do is append this query with our column names to our original sales data query. What append will do is it will add from the selected table rows or columns that do not exist in the original query. It will not update the original query. Let's click on our original query, Sales Data, and in the Home tab, click on Append Queries. This Append dialog box pops up. We want to append 2 tables, and the table we want to append is Sales Data Column Names, and click on OK. Let's send this back to Excel as a connection. Let's delete a column and hit refresh, but our query still breaks. Let's go back to Power Query here in the Change Type step. Let's click on our formula bar, and this is the first step where the column names are hard-coded. If you'd like to understand more on how the change type step causes errors and how to fix them, you should definitely check out this video here. Power Query Error Handling, how to deal with Power Query errors. The link is in the description also. So now we can see the first place in our query where the hard coding of the columns occurs. We need our appended query step to move to before that first step. Let's right-click on Appended Query and click on Move Before, and our appended query moves to before the change type step. Let's click on the change type step and we can see that our query is fixed. Let's send this back to Excel. Our status column is back in our query report and it shows null values as this is the one we deleted from our source. Let's delete our product column and hit refresh, and our query doesn't break. Next, let's see how to dynamically change a column name without breaking our query. On the top here, we have our source data with 5 column names in a table. And at the bottom here, I've created a table showing our old column names and the new column names. Let's send the source data to Power Query. On our Data tab, click on From Table or Range. Here in the query editor, we have our applied steps, showing our source and change type steps. To dynamically change the column names, we need to perform 3 steps as follows. Step 1. We need to rename a column so that we have the code for how Power Query performs the step. Let's rename Rep to Sales Rep and hit Enter. Over here in our applied steps, Power Query has recorded the renamed column step. Let's click on this drop down to expand the formula bar to take a closer look at the code written for this step. In this step, we have a function called table.renameColumns. This is the function that renames our old column name with the new name. The first argument is referencing Power Query to the change type step, which is the step before renamed columns. The next 2 arguments in the curly brackets show the old column name, Rep, and the new column name, Sales Rep. The curly brackets indicate that these 2 arguments are 2 lists. So the rename column step requires these 2 values, Rep and Sales Rep, to be provided as lists. We can think of a list as a single column in a table. So our Sales Rep column is a list in our sales data table, and the same goes for the rest of our columns. They're seen as lists in our table. Lists are shown in curly brackets. We can see that Rep and Sales Rep have been hard-coded, but we want this to be dynamic. In step 2, we will create a list that we can use to replace this section of hard coding, which will enable our query to be dynamic. Let's send this back to Excel. We can place our report in the existing worksheet. Now, to create our list in Power Query, we're going to use this table here, which shows our old column names and new column names. Let's send this data to Power Query. My table does not have headers, so I won't check that and click on OK. Let's rename this table to column names. If we look on the left here, we have 2 queries, and this icon shows both queries are tables. But we want our column names to be a list instead of a table, because remember the function table.renameColumns requires our old column name and new column name to be provided as a list. To convert this to a list, we need to first transpose this table to get it into the correct format, as what we actually want is for Rep and Sales Rep to be in the same column and Number and Sales Number to be in the same column, and so forth. Let me show you what I mean. Click on the Transform tab and click Transpose. So we have our old name and new name in the same column. This is still in a table, so let's convert this into a list, as we have the correct format now. To convert this to a list, we need to use our advanced editor. You will find this in the Home tab or also here in the View tab. Let's open up the advanced editor. And here are the formulas that Power Query uses to generate our query. It shows the formula for each step. So for example, our change type step, this is the formula it uses. This is M code. I will be doing a video on the advanced editor with an introduction to M, so please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when the video is released. At the end of this closed parentheses, insert a comma and press enter. Now we're going to give our list a name. Let's call it column names list equals, and we're going to use the table.toColumns function. Open parentheses and start typing transposed, and transposed table comes up. Select that. You'll see that each step builds upon a previous step by referring to a step by name. So here our previous step was the transposed table step. Just to note, the M code is case sensitive. Then over here in the in section, transposed table is referenced. As this defines the step, we need this to be column names list. And hit done. And now we have our list. So what our formula has done is create a list for each of the 5 columns we had. So our first list shows rep and sales rep. Then we have a list showing number and sales number, and so forth. Step 3. Now we have our column names as a list. You can see that the icon on the left here has also changed. We're going to input this into our formula for renaming columns. So in the sales data table, in the table.rename columns formula, we have our change type step, and after the comma, we have the hard coding of the old name and new name. So let's delete everything after the comma and start typing column names, and select that and insert closed parentheses and hit enter. And we've now created a formula to dynamically change our column names. Step 4 is just an added step. If the column doesn't exist, an exception is thrown unless the optional parameter missing field specifies an alternative. Example, missing field.ignore or missing field.use null. I'm going to use missing field.ignore. Let's send this back to Excel. Now let's test this out. Let's rename sales rep to account manager and hit refresh, and our sales data query is automatically updated. If you would like to learn more on how to deal with Power Query errors, then please check out these videos here. Power Query Error Handling Part 1 and 2. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.